This one is all about stress management. And we're taking a kind of different approach today.
Oh.
Our source material is this podcast episode called Become Fluent with Miss Fluency.
Okay.
And they connect stress management with learning a new language.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's really clever when you think about it.
Yeah, both involve consistency and like facing challenges.
Right. And sometimes just feeling totally overwhelmed.
Yeah. They use that shared experience to make stress management feel less intimidating, more like approachable.
Yeah, exactly.
Something we can actually tackle.
That's what intrigued me too. And so our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the most practical tips from Become Fluent.
Okay.
And see how we can apply them to our own lives.
All right. Sounds good.
Ready to de-stress.
Let's do it.
And maybe learn a little bit about language learning along the way.
Awesome.
Okay, so the podcast starts by defining stress.
Okay.
And they make a great point that stress isn't always a bad thing. A little bit can actually be motivating.
Yeah, like that deadline that pushes you to get things done.
Yes, like that feeling right before you're about to give a presentation.
Yeah.
A little nervous energy can help you focus.
Yeah, but too much and it can be downhill from there.
Exactly. Too much is definitely bad. And the podcast compares it to learning a language.
Uh-huh.
Daily practice is good, but trying to cram in like a year's worth of vocabulary the night before a trip,
right?
That's just asking for a meltdown.
Totally. You're just going to stress yourself out even more.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, that optimal level of stress that keeps you engaged and moving forward without tipping into overwhelm.
Right.
Which brings us to the next point.
Okay.
Figuring out what your personal stressors are.
Yes, that's key.
They suggest journaling, which, that seems like pretty standard advice.
Yeah.
But here's what I found interesting.
What's that?
The physical act of writing things down can actually change how your brain perceives a problem. It's like you're tricking your mind into thinking, hey, this is manageable. I can actually do something about this.
Yeah. Have you experienced that with journaling?
Absolutely. And putting things on paper, it just gets them out of the swirling vortex of your mind and helps you see them more objectively.
I agree.
But journaling isn't the only way to identify your stressors.
Right.
Mindfulness exercises.
Yes.
Talking to someone you trust.
That's a good one.
Or even just taking some quiet time for reflection.
Yeah, this can be really valuable.
So it's about tuning into your own internal signals and figuring out what sets off that stress response for you.
Exactly.
The podcast also makes this distinction between external stressors.
Okay.
Like work deadlines, family responsibilities.
Yeah.
The
stuff life throws at you.
Right? And then internal stressors.
Interesting.
Those are the things we do to ourselves.
Oh, like what?
That little voice that whispers, you're not good enough, or you should be doing more.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating how we can be our own worst enemies sometimes.
I know, it's so true.
We create these unrealistic expectations for ourselves.
Right.
And then we stress out when we inevitably fall short.
Yeah. Recognizing those internal stressors is key.
Yes, because those are the ones we often have the most power to change.
Absolutely.
Okay, so enough about identifying stress.
Yeah.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Okay.
How to actually manage it.
I'm ready.
The podcast dives into 5 practical techniques.
All right.
And the first one is all about breathing.
Okay, interesting.
They specifically recommend the 4-7-8 breathing technique.
Okay, and how does that work?
You inhale for a count of 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8.
Sounds simple enough.
Right, it sounds deceptively simple.
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of science behind why it works.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What's the magic behind slowing down your breath like that?
Well, when you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear.
Right.
That's your fight or flight response. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, your heart rate increases, and your body is just flooded with stress hormones.
Right.
Yeah. By consciously slowing down your breathing, you're essentially hitting the brakes on that stress response. You're sending a signal to your parasympathetic nervous system,
Okay.
the rest and digest system, to take over.
So it's like tricking your body into thinking everything is okay.
Exactly, even when your mind is racing.
I like that.
Me too.
The next technique they suggest is move your body.
Okay.
And they mention things like walking, yoga, or dancing.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing any kind of movement you enjoy could work, right?
Absolutely. The key is to get those endorphins flowing.
Right.
Exercise is like a natural antidepressant.
Yeah.
It boosts your mood, improves sleep, and helps regulate those stress hormones.
Nice. So it's like a win-win-win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about like hitting the gym or something.
Right.
Finding ways to incorporate movement into your daily routine can make a big difference, like taking the stairs instead of the elevator.
Right.
Going for a walk during your lunch break, or even just dancing around your kitchen while you're cooking dinner. Yeah, those little things add up.
Exactly.
Speaking of shifting energy,
Okay.
the podcast's third technique is practice mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Okay.
They describe it as like being present in the moment.
Uh-huh.
And they suggest things like meditation or focusing on everyday tasks like washing the dishes.
Okay.
That always sounds so difficult to me, to be honest.
Really?
Like, how can washing dishes be mindful?
Well, I get it. It sounds kind of esoteric at first.
Yeah.
But mindfulness is really about training your attention.
Okay.
So instead of letting your mind race ahead to all the things you need to do or whatever,
Right.
you're bringing your focus to the sensations of the present moment.
Okay.
So with the dishes, you'd pay attention to the feeling of the warm water on your hands,
Okay.
the scent of the soap, the sound of the water swirling down the drain,
I see.
It's about engaging all your senses and really being in that moment.
So it's not about emptying your mind completely,
No, not at all.
but more about directing your attention intentionally. Okay, I'm starting to get it now.
Good.
What are some other ways you practice mindfulness besides meditation?
Nature walks are a big one for me.
Yeah.
Just being in nature, surrounded by trees, listening to the birds,
All right.
feeling the sun on my skin. It's incredibly grounding and calming.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's as simple as taking a few deep breaths before I start a task,
Yeah.
or consciously savoring the first sip of my morning coffee.
Yeah.
It's about finding those little moments throughout the day to pause and reconnect with yourself
Okay.
and appreciate the simple things.
I like that those are great examples.
Thanks.
Now, for a technique that I think a lot of us struggle with,
What's that?
setting boundaries.
Ah, yes, that's a tough one.
The podcast emphasizes learning to say no.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, that's something I'm still working on.
It's hard.
It is. Why is it so hard for us to set those boundaries?
Well, I think it's a combination of things.
Okay.
We often feel pressured to please others,
Yeah.
to be helpful.
To be seen as capable and reliable. Exactly.
They're afraid of disappointing people.
Yeah.
Or missing out on opportunities.
That too.
And for many of us, it stems from a fear of conflict.
Right.
Or a belief that our needs aren't as important as the needs of others.
It's like we have this internal script that says, I have to say yes or I'm a bad person.
Yes, exactly.
But what I'm realizing is that saying yes to everything often means saying no to ourselves,
Right.
to our own well-being.
To the things that truly matter to us.
Absolutely.
And when we overextend ourselves, we end up feeling resentful, exhausted,
Yeah,
and ultimately more stressed.
exactly. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's about protecting your time and energy.
Right.
So you can show up fully for yourself and the people you care about.
That leads perfectly into the final technique.
Okay, what is it?
Connect with others.
Connect with others. All right.
The podcast talks about the power of social support.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But sometimes even being around people can be stressful.
Oh, I know what you mean.
How do you navigate that? It's a delicate balance for sure.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that idea of quality over quantity.
Okay.
It's not about having a huge social circle.
Right.
It's about having a few people you trust, people who listen without judgment, people who make you feel safe and supported.
Yes.
And sometimes connecting with others isn't even about talking things out. It's about doing something enjoyable together, like going for a walk, watching a movie,
Right.
sharing a meal,
It's about creating those moments of shared experience.
Exactly, the ones that nourish your soul and remind you that you're not alone.
It's like those friends who can just sense when you need a hug or a listening ear or a good laugh.
Yeah.
Those are the people to keep close.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've covered 5 practical techniques for managing stress in the moment.
Right.
Now, the podcast shifts gears a bit
Okay.
and talks about building long-term resilience.
Long-term resilience.
And they focus on 4 key areas.
Okay.
Routine,
Okay.
sleep,
Uh-huh.
diet,
Got it.
and gratitude.
These are like the foundational pillars of well-being.
Yes.
When we neglect these areas, we're essentially setting ourselves up for stress.
So let's start with routine.
Okay.
The podcast doesn't really go into detail about why routine is so important for stress management.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think routine provides a sense of predictability and control,
Okay.
which can be incredibly grounding when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It helps reduce decision fatigue.
I can see that.
and creates like a framework for your day, freeing up mental energy for other things.
So it's like having a roadmap.
Exactly.
You know, where you're going and how to get there.
Yeah.
So you can just relax and enjoy the journey a bit more.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
I'm someone who thrives on routine, at least to a certain extent.
Okay.
I like having like a general structure to my day,
Right.
but I also need some flexibility.
I'm similar. A balance of structure and flexibility works best for me.
Yeah, me too.
I have certain non-negotiables.
Okay, like what?
Like my morning meditation and my evening walk.
Oh, nice.
But I also leave room for spontaneity and adjust my schedule as needed.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Not trying to force yourself into a rigid routine that feels suffocating.
Right.
Now, let's talk about sleep,
Okay.
which, let's be honest, is something most of us could probably use more of.
Probably true.
The podcast mentions its importance.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like the sleep-stress connection.
Well, sleep is when our bodies and minds repair and recharge.
Right.
When we're sleep deprived, our stress hormones go haywire. Our cognitive function takes a nosedive.
Makes sense.
And our emotional resilience plummets.
Yeah. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty tank.
Exactly. You're going to crash and burn.
And it becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Stress disrupts sleep, which leads to more stress and so on.
Right. Prioritizing sleep is honestly one of the best things you can do
I agree.
for your overall well-being and your ability to manage stress effectively.
Okay, enough said about sleep.
Right.
Let's move on to diet.
Okay.
The podcast touches on the connection between what we eat and how we handle stress,
Huh.
but they don't get into specifics.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, while I'm not a nutritionist,
Right?
I think it's safe to say that what we put into our bodies impacts how we feel,
Yeah.
both physically and mentally.
Right.
A balanced diet that provides the nutrients we need can support our overall resilience
Okay.
and help us cope with stress more effectively.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, a diet high in processed foods, sugar, and caffeine
Yeah.
can actually exacerbate stress symptoms.
It's like putting the wrong kind of fuel in your car.
Exactly.
It's not going to run smoothly.
It's about being mindful of what we're consuming
Right.
and making choices that support our well-being.
Instead of sabotaging it.
Exactly.
And finally, the podcast talks about the benefits of gratitude.
Gratitude.
Okay. I know it's become a bit of a buzzword these days.
Yeah, it has.
But do you find that practicing gratitude actually helps with stress management?
Absolutely. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to stress.
Okay.
When we focus on what we're grateful for, it shifts our perspective away from negativity and worry.
Yeah.
It helps us to appreciate the good things in our lives.
Even when things are tough.
Exactly. It's like choosing to focus on the flowers in the garden instead of the weeds.
I like that analogy.
And research has shown that practicing gratitude can have a profound impact on our well-being,
Really?
from improving sleep quality to reducing symptoms of anxiety and depression.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is.
And we're back for the final part of your personalized deep dive into stress management.
It's amazing how much we've unpacked already.
Right. We've covered a lot of ground, from breathing techniques to the power of gratitude.
Yeah, all inspired by that Become Fluent podcast and their unique approach.
And just like reaching fluency in a new language opens up all these new possibilities.
Right, like a whole new world.
It's exactly.
Mastering stress management can unlock a level of well-being you didn't even think was possible.
I love that.
It is exciting to think about.
Yeah.
But I know it can also feel kind of overwhelming.
Right.
Like, where do I even begin?
I get it. It's like standing at the foot of a mountain.
Yeah.
You're looking up at the peak,
Right.
wondering, how am I ever going to get there?
But remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
So true.
No.
And speaking of steps,
Okay.
the host of Become Fluent poses this great question at the end of their episode.
Oh, yeah.
And we wanted to leave you with that same question to ponder.
Okay, hit me with it.
Which of these techniques will you try first?
That is a good question.
It's powerful because it invites you to take action.
Right.
It's about moving beyond just the knowledge and into experience.
It's like reading a cookbook
Yeah.
versus actually getting in the kitchen and trying a recipe.
Right. You can read about all the ingredients and techniques,
Mhm.
but until you actually taste the food, you don't really know what it's all about. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we challenge you to pick one technique
Yeah.
that really resonated with you and give it a try.
Just one?
It could be the 4-7-8 breathing technique,
Okay.
a quick mindfulness exercise, setting a boundary with a colleague,
Right.
or even just making a conscious effort to connect with a loved one.
Simple things.
And remember, it doesn't have to be this huge, life-altering change.
No, start small.
Be consistent.
Yeah.
And notice how even those small shifts can make a difference in your stress levels.
and your overall well-being.
Exactly. And as you continue on your stress management journey,
Yeah.
remember that we're all works in progress.
So true.
There will be days when you feel like you've got it all figured out, and there will be days when you feel like you're back at square one.
That's just part of it.
That's the beauty of a journey, right?
Yeah.
There are always new discoveries to be made, new challenges to overcome, new insights to gain.
And you're not alone on this journey. We're all in this together, navigating the ups and downs of life.
Exactly. And learning how to manage stress in a way that empowers us to live our best lives.
I love that.
We hope this deep dive is giving you the tools and inspiration you need to embark on your own personal stress management adventure.
Your own adventure.
Until next time, be kind to yourself.
And happy stress managing.